Good afternoon. Ito po yung magiging ah, report ko. So, all about synthesis. Okay, the first stage for in doing the cultural mapping, which is synthesis. Okay. For synthesis po, meron lang siyang 3 steps. So, step 11, wrapping out the map. Step 12, converting inventory into a map. And step 13, analysis and interpretation. Uh, Different steps are subdivided into different aspects. Okay, so sa objective po ngayon, malalaman nyo po yung iba't ibang iba't ibang parte ng mga steps in doing the synthesis part of cultural mapping. Okay, so uh, for step 11, roughing out a map. In this stage, you are answering what do we need to know. Okay? Dito po sa step 11 or roughing out a map, uh, you will align your gathered data to your objectives. Okay? Ia-align nyo siya. Titignan nyo po yung relevance ng data nyo sa mga objectives ninyo. Okay? Once that this data were aligned to the objectives or to the questions, the answer to those questions now will be your findings. Okay? Information that serves as answer to your objectives are called findings. Ulitin ko po, paano makukuha ang findings once na na-align nyo na yung mga data nyo with your objectives. Okay? So from there, from your findings, you will be able to subdivide or you will be able to create subsets of ideas. Okay, you will be able to categorize your findings according to its relevance to the objectives, according on how it answers your objectives. Okay, that is now for step 11. Now, for example, uh, a part of your as you can see there, a part of your objective includes uh, performing arts. Okay, differing or you are inaalam mo yung iba't ibang uri ng performing arts, specifically dances. Okay? Now, in your data gathering, you will be able, these are the things that you will be able to gather or to yung mga data na maaaring may punta sa data gathering nyo. So, syempre, we have the list of different performing arts. Okay, yung iba't ibang uri ng sayaw. Next, identification of its purpose and its venue where the dance was performed, which is very important. Okay? Alamin nyo po yung dahilan niya at kung saan po siya itinatanghal. Okay? Malalaman, kasama rin po dito yung uh, the dancers or the performers. Okay? So meron na sa data nyo, makikita nyo dito yung sayaw, kung saan siya itinatanghal, ano ang purpose niya. Okay? Siyempre, makakahalubilo nyo rin, matatakal nyo rin yung mga nagsasayaw. Okay? And then lastly, importante rin po to, malalaman nyo rin dito yung data given by the performers. Okay, so from this data now and from the data that you've gathered, from these things, you will be able to sort out your objectives. Okay, so there, andun na yung, kumbaga, magiging content So from there, from that data now, doon po nyo masasagot or doon nyo makukuha yung mga sagot para sa mga objectives ninyo. Okay? Now, since you started sorting out, okay? Since you've gathered answers for your objects, you've gathered data rather for your objectives, these are the things to remember when sorting out data. First, make sure your data will be aligned to your objectives, which is very important. Okay? Make sure po that your data, that your gathered data has a relevance to your question. Siguraduhin nyo pong lahat ng mga data nyo masasagot ang mga katanungan na ginawa ninyo. Okay? Secondly, okay, yung mga bagay, yung mga data which was sorted out, which is not aligned to your to your question or to your objective, it doesn't mean that those are useless. Okay, ano po ang purpose on ba't sinort nyo? Because these things now will give you an avenue of different information. Okay? Meron po yung mga data. Okay? Meron po yung mga data which directly answers your question. Meron din po yung mga data which will reinforce. Okay? Yun po yung isusort nyo. Okay? Data that will directly answer your questions or your objectives and data that will reinforce. Okay? Data that will reinforce your answers. Okay? All of this depends on your knowledge and it depends on the situation. Okay? And lastly, if you're trying to solve or if you're trying to answer your questions, okay? Make sure make sure na ang kukunin yung data is ay yung mga data that directly answers your objective. Okay? In answering problems or issue or in answering your objectives, make sure to use the data that directly answers your question. Sabi ko nga po kanina, yung mga sorted data other from your other from the answers that you've gathered, these things now will reinforce your data. It will create different diagnoses. It will create alternate solutions. Okay? It will create alternate solutions to your question. Okay? And but sabi ko nga, not all of this will be used. You have to consider. You have to evaluate. Okay? Evaluate now sorted data that has relevance, that has a relevance, okay, to your question, the practicability, meaning feasible ba siya? Pwede ba siyang magawa? Okay? Or pwede ba siyang ma-achieve? Kumbaga. And kung gaano siya kadalas lumabas sa data mo. Okay? Gaano siya ka-common? Gaano siya mag-occur sa mga questions mo? Okay? Next. Now, you've answered your question. Okay? You've answered your question. You've created now different sets of answers for your question. Now, are you on yun lang ba yung gagamitin mo? Not necessarily. Okay, sabi ko nga, different data creates different avenues for answering your objectives. Okay, so you could use uh, unlimited number of maps as long as it will answer directly your objectives. Okay, now researchers now, or cultural map, or in the synthesis rather, in this part now, we are not limited to a single analysis or map. Okay, um, yes, indeed, it will direct you to the answer. Okay, but for practicality, okay, you have to create map that will create different avenues of learning, or different avenues on how to answer your questions, on uh, how findings could help answer your objectives. Okay, by the word itself, limited, limited. Okay, as if you're limiting limiting your idea to a single path. Okay, as a researcher, you have you have to consider the different avenues on how to answer your objectives. Okay, that is why creating subsets or creating subdivided data will be will truly help you gather information, will help you create or establish the accuracy and the trustworthiness of your data. So you need to categorize. Okay, so again, are we limited to one map only? Not necessarily, because different maps now will create different avenues, will create different ideas on how you will answer your objectives, on how findings could help answer your findings. Okay, so there. Step 11 po, in simple term, isa-sum up nyo lahat ng gathered data niyo. Okay? Sorting out data that are relevant to your objectives. That is now for step 11. Now, step 12, you have your data. Okay? You have your data, you have your answers. Now, it is time now for you to uh, materialize your data, which is now creating your map. Okay? In step 12 now, or converting an inventory to a map, inventory means your gathered data. Your gathered data relevant to your research now will be materialized by using map, by converting it into a map. Okay? Now, this map now includes all the dimensions you want to capture. Okay? Uh, it includes all of the answers, all of the aspects of your answers to meet with your objectives. Okay. Secondly, an inventory turned map should be organized. Okay. It should be organized so as to answer your question, or so as to answer your main questions. Sabi ko nga, the direct data should directly answer also your questions. Okay. And then third, a map should be available for different resources. Okay. An inventory third map should provide, uh, or rather should be uh, achieved using different resources. That is why all sorted data should create different avenues. For example, you've directed to a certain question. Yes, it directly answered the question, but What about if we use different aspects? Okay? So there, sabi ko nga, um, your inventory for the third aspect, your inventory turn map should be complete for different resources. Again, to achieve the accuracy and to achieve the trustworthiness of your research, of your cultural mapping per se. Okay? And moving from data to its representation, which is the map, should proceed logically. Same as scientific process, it should proceed step by step. Okay? Do not immediately go to conclusion. Yes, you have your data. Okay? To further reinforce your data, you should be able to convert this data into a map so as to see the logical development of your data. Okay? Now, in map making now, legends are very important. I think you're very familiar with legends are key symbols. Okay? Visual explanation that are used for your map. Okay? These things now represent now the different aspects of your research. Okay, now are are we given certain standardized legend to use? Not necessarily. Dito po papasok ang creativity and practicality of the researcher. Okay? Researchers are given the privilege to use um different ways or different symbols to use as legend. Okay? Anong purpose nito? Pa- It depends on how you understand your research and how you want to make your research easier by the use of map legends. Okay? Like I told you, but the main thing here is the symbols that you use should directly represent your data. Okay? It's not the purpose of creating an artistic or a colorful map. Not necessarily. Yes, we could use our creativity. We could use our creativity, but make sure that these symbols now will directly represent your data. Okay? Now, in the legend, yes, in the use of legend now, you have to determine what you will need to represent. Am I gonna represent every aspects or every parts of the map? Not necessarily. You have to represent parts of the map that will be useful for your um uh for your data. Okay? Hindi po lahat lalagyan nyo ng legends. Hindi po lahat ng parts ng map lalagyan nyo ng colors or symbols. Not necessarily. Those that will again directly help you in achieving your objectives, in answering your questions. Okay? Now, in a graphic map, okay, the tools available are the map scale and coordinates, which is geographical divisions and markers, which is very common in using the map. These are the main things in using a map. So you have to scale the map. You have to learn the coordinates. Okay, it's the different divisions. of your map and the different markers which will be represented again by your legends. Okay? Again, sabi ko nga, these things should be taken seriously, but it will also include your creativity on the use of the different symbols. Okay? You may use your own preferred symbols, but make sure that these symbols now will directly represent or will directly give you answers to your objectives. Okay? It's not about how colorful your map is. No. Okay? It is how you will represent now your data to the map. Okay? On how you will be able to make your research easier using these visual representations. Okay? In presenting the information, you need to identify your available resources. Like I told you, things that are available yes, that you could use immediately. Okay? And the different landmarks and different landmarks used in your data gathering. Okay? Now, there. So, again, to a short recap now. Step 11, you have now to synthesize per se, or you have now to sort out data that will be relevant to your um, research. Okay, sorting out gathered data rather, that could answer directly your questions. Now, upon sorting out this data, you have now to convert this data into a map. Okay, so in step 12 now, you're giving now directions to your data. Okay, you place now landmarks, you place now legends that could identify now the different aspects of your data. Okay, kumbaga alam mo na kung saan patungo, ang ang data mo, kung saan tutungo, saan pupunta at ano ang pupuntahan ng data mo using now your maps. Okay? Now, in step 13 now, in the synthesis stage, all right, analysis and interpretation. Now, may data ka, you've converted it into a map. Now, in step 13 now, i-analyze mo ngayon ano ang relevance nun. Ano na ang mangyayari after you map your data. Okay, so there are now things to consider in interpreting your data. First, the overview and urgencies. Okay, here, make sure that all of you, the researcher, and the respondents, or your target audience, have a comprehensive view of the general situation. Kumbaga, alam nila ano yung purpose ng mapping mo. You as a researcher and your audience should have an idea kung saan pupunta yung analysis mo. Okay? Ano nga ba ang purpose nito? Okay? Bakit ba kailangan meron ito? Okay. Secondly, the distribution of usage within sectors. So in the first part, you have to consider your audience. You have to consider yourself. You have to consider your audience. In the second part, distribution of usage, you have to consider now the population. You have to identify your population and you have to identify your resources. Magagamit ko ba sa mga resources na na-collect ko, na-gather ko, makakatulong ba siya, makatutulong ba siya sa pag-gather ko ng data? Even for the population, sa mga respondents, makakatulong ba sila for my data? Or nakatulong ba sila? Okay? Third, gaps, bonuses, and surprises, which is, this is very common to researchers. Okay? What is this? Uh, while you're having researches rather, okay, hindi maiiwasan na merong mga bagay, okay, na makadadagdag sa data mo. May mga bagay na hindi mo alam kasali pala sa research mo. Okay, now, as a researcher, okay, as a researcher, you have to identify these surprises. Okay, you have to identify the possible and incoming concerns rooting from the data you gathered. You have to overlook things. You have to identify, kapag sinagutan ko ba to? For example, kapag sinagutan ko ba to, ano kaya ang mga pwedeng maging problema dito? Okay? Ano kaya ang mga bagay na pwedeng matakal dito? Okay? Now, as a researcher, you have to identify that. Bago pa magsimula, dapat meron ka ng idea how to resolve those issues. Okay? For example, ito yung data ko. What if yung tao ayaw? What if yung tao ayaw sumagot, ayaw magpa-interview? Okay? Paano ko ngayon, sila yung kailangan kong interview, paano ko ngayon makukuha yung accuracy ng data ko? Okay? So you have to be prepared. Kumbaga, sabi nga sabi nga, the alphabet has no, yes, the alphabet has 26 letters. If plan A doesn't work, the alphabet has 26 letters. So you need to plan ahead. You need to overcome those concerns bago sila dumating. Kailangan meron ka ng prepared na gawain, meron ka ng prepared na remedy before this problem will arise. Okay? Next, interconnections. Okay? In the interconnections, you have to identify different social networks or different groups and what are common among those groups. Okay? Now, you've sorted out things. Like I told you, even if you sorted out your data, what is the very common thing about those data? For example, for every group, you've sorted out the different. For example, performing arts, you've sorted out different groups. Okay, now upon sorting those things out, what is now you have to identify what is the common thing among those groups. Okay, which could help in your data gathering, which could help in your interpretation, rather, in your analysis of data. Okay. Next, opportunities and vision. Okay. Same with gaps and surprises. In this part, you have also to identify the strengths and weaknesses of your data. Okay. Identify your strengths and challenge the weaknesses of your data. What do you mean challenge? Okay? Wag niyong pabayaang maging weakness 'yon. Rather, hanapan niyo ng remedy. Okay? Once you've done that, once you've searched for a remedy for your weaknesses, it will further reinforce your data. It will further reinforce your research. Okay? And then working with relationships. Okay? In this part, you have to identify the contextual and qualitative aspects of your research to the community. Sabi ko nga, ano, in doing analysis and interpretation, ano ang you have to ask you have to ask yourself, ano ang magiging tulong nito sa community? Paano nito matutulungan ang community nyo? Paano nito matutulungan ang tao? Okay? So yes, you've done your research. Okay? Tapos ka na, you interpreted everything. You analyzed thoroughly everything. But the question is, how can this interpretation help people? How can this interpretation help the community? Okay? You have to consider that. Because, yun nga, the most important thing about cultural mapping is all about consultation with the community. Okay? Cultural mapping will not be successful if we are not involved in the community, if we are not going to the community. But given the situation today, it's very risky. Okay? But in the proper way of doing cultural mapping, you have to consult or you have to be with the community regularly. Okay? You have to report to the community. Okay? You have to tell them that everything's done. You have to tell them the need. You have to ask them some assistance. Okay? You have also to let them check your map, your preliminary mapping. Okay? Kumbaga, the community will help you will help the accuracy of your data. Alongside with it, you're able to communicate, you're able to socialize with the community. Kumbaga, mararamdaman nila, significant pala kami. Kinakailangan pala kami sa research na to. Importante pala kami sa research na to. Okay? Now, make sure you stay on your topic. Make sure you stay on your data. Okay? You and the respondents should be able to stay on your objective. Why? Because if you kept on adding data on your research, it will create now confusion. Okay, on the third part, on the analysis. Okay, make sure um, everyone will stay on the topic. Okay? Make sure that it will not create a certain problem again. You have to tell them. You have to tell them that stay on this topic so as not to create another problem on your research, which will be difficult again for you as a researcher, as if you're starting all over again. So you have to remind them that this is our topic. Okay? Again, you have to emphasize the gains made to date and present the rationale for any adjustments. Okay? Or ano ang pakinabang nito sa community? Okay? And then the fourth one now, outline the next step, signaling openness to suggestions regarding what is to come, not what has already been done. That is why cultural mapping is um, a logical or a scientific process. You have to identify what needs to be done, okay? Not what has already been done. You have to tell them. You have to be open to them. The things that are required for your analysis and interpretation. Okay, again, sabi ko nga, kapag binabalik-balikan nyo, lalo lang magkakaroon ng confusion, lalong hindi matatapos yung research mo. So again, you have to tell them that this is the track of our, or this is the development of our research. We're done on this part. We have to move on. We have to identify. We have to identify things that needs to be done in order for us to finish the research. Okay, sulitin ko po, huwag niyong babalik-balikan yung mga natapos na. Okay? And again, the realities of your research. In interpreting now, you have to identify the situation of the community. Makakaya ba? Sa nagawa mong research, makakaya ba siyang ma-achieve ng community? So parang sabi nga sa ibang report, it has something to do with monetary value or the financial aspect of the researcher and the community. Yes, maganda yung output mo, maganda yung interpretation mo, pero kaya ba siyang ma-achieve ng community? Okay? Now, secondly, your study may deliver information that was previously unknown or not taken into consideration, and your results could chart a new set of realities. Okay? May mga bagay kang malalaman na ikaw lang nakakaalam. Or kumbaga, the surprises which is not accounted for or which is not taken into consideration. Okay? Previously unknown by the community and you yourself as a researcher. Okay? And these things now could create now new sets of reality. Kaya nga sabi ko kayo na you have to foresee. You have to overlook things. Okay? You have to take in consideration the things that might be part of your research. Okay? And lastly, with the help of the participants, you have reviewed data, finalized the essential map to express your findings, and refine your conclusions and recommendations, which is very true. With the help of the participants or with the help of the community. Sabi nga, from the previous discussions, Walang sino man ang nabubuhay para sa sarili lamang. Socialization, this is a community. You need the help of the community. Yes, you're intelligent. You're a good researcher, but still you need the help of your participants. You need the help of your respondents. Again, okay? So before I end, I would like to acknowledge the Ma'am Gertrude, Dr. Gertrude Corpus for providing the toolkit for my research. Okay, so that's it. And thank you.